Okay, let's dive into one of the most critical neurological signs a clinician can encounter. We're talking about abnormal motor posturing. Now, this isn't just some random reflex. It's a direct, urgent message from a brain in crisis. And knowing how to read that message, well, it can literally be the difference between life and death.
So we basically see two main types of this posturing. You've got decorticate, which is this kind of abnormal flexion, and then you have decerebrate, which is an abnormal extension. Now, at first glance, they both look incredibly severe, and they are. But the real key is in the details, because the specific posture tells us a story about exactly where the brain is being injured.
And you're going to want to remember this. There's a fantastic little mnemonic to keep these two straight. For decorticate posturing, think of the arms coming to the core of the body. Simple, right? And for decerebrate, with all those E's in there, just think E for extended. It's a super simple trick, but trust me, it can be a lifesaver in a high-pressure situation.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with just how urgent this sign is. Then we'll dive deep into the brain's wiring to see what's actually causing it. After that, we'll cover how to score the severity, what the immediate emergency response looks like, and finally, what this all means for the patient's outcome.
Okay, first up, why is this such a big deal? Why is it a drop everything and run kind of situation?
Yeah, to be super clear, we are not talking about a simple twitch or a muscle spasm here. This is a pathological, hardcore sign of a severe active injury. It's screaming that there's damage or just immense pressure on the brainstem, usually from something awful like a traumatic injury, a massive stroke, or a brain bleed. You've heard the saying, time is brain, right? Well, this is the brain's loudest, most desperate alarm bell.
So what is actually going on inside the brain to cause this? I mean, to really understand the problem, we first have to get a handle on how the system is supposed to work. We've got to look under the hood at the incredible neuroanatomy that keeps us moving and upright every single day.
Now, I know this diagram looks, well, like a lot, but the main idea is actually pretty simple. Think of it like a system of checks and balances. You've got these different highways or pathways starting in the brain and traveling down the spinal cord to our muscles. Some of these pathways are sending flex signals and others are sending extend signals. In a healthy brain, it's all in a perfect, delicate balance.
So let's really break that balance down. The seesaw analogy is perfect here. On one side of the seesaw, you've got the tracts driving flexion, especially in the arms. That's the corticospinal and rubrospinal tracts. On the other side, pushing for extension and keeping us upright against gravity are the vestibulospinal and reticulospinal tracts. Normally, that seesaw is perfectly level.
Okay, so we have this beautifully balanced system. Now, what happens when a major brain injury just throws a wrench into the whole thing at different levels of the brainstem?
So let's start with decorticate posturing. That's the abnormal flexion, right? This is what you see when the injury is above a really critical landmark in the midbrain, a structure called the red nucleus. And its location is the absolute key to understanding everything that comes next. If you look at this diagram, you can literally see what's happening. A lesion high up in the brain, it's like it cuts the wires from the cortex. It cuts off the stop signals. But, and this is the crucial part, it leaves the red nucleus and its flexion pathway, the rubrospinal tract, totally untouched. So with its leash cut, that flexion pathway just goes wild, firing completely unopposed and causing that classic powerful arm flexion.
Okay, now for decerebrate posturing. This extensor response is a much more ominous sign. It tells us the damage is lower down, either at or maybe even below the red nucleus. And what that means is that the brain's main flexion centers have been taken completely offline.
And you can see why right here. This lower injury, it's just catastrophic for the motor system. It knocks out not just the control from the cortex, but the entire flexion pathway itself. So if we go back to our seesaw, one side is now completely gone. All that's left are those powerful extensor pathways coming up from the brainstem. With absolutely nothing to oppose them, they fire uncontrollably, causing that rigid, full-body extension.
And this is absolutely critical. If you're at the bedside and you see a patient go from that flexor posturing to the extensor posturing, that is a 5-alarm fire. It often means the brain is actively herniating. It's swelling and being forced down into the skull. That is a true, call them now, neurosurgical emergency.
All right, so you see this at the bedside. How do you quantify it? How do you communicate this to your team in a standardized way that everyone everywhere understands? Well, that's exactly what the Glasgow Coma Scale was designed for.
The Glasgow Coma Scale, or GCS, is the gold standard across the world for assessing a person's level of consciousness after a brain injury. Now, it's got 3 parts, but the motor response is the single most important factor for predicting a patient's outcome. And as you can see, these specific postures have their very own scores.
So, for that abnormal flexion, decorticate posturing, that gets a motor score of 3.
And then, for that more severe extension, decerebrate posturing, the score drops down to a 2. And let me tell you, that single-point difference on the GCS can signal a massive decline in the patient's condition and, frankly, their chances of survival.
Okay, so seeing these signs isn't just an academic exercise in scoring. It kicks off a very specific, very urgent, evidence-based protocol that's designed to save brain function.
The ENLS, the Emergency Neurological Life Support Protocol, basically gives us a playbook for this exact scenario. The second you see signs of herniation, posturing, a blown pupil, a big GCS drop, the clock starts ticking. You immediately intervene, maybe with something like mild hyperventilation to buy yourself some time, while someone else is ordering an emergent head CT, and you are on the phone with neurosurgery. It's a coordinated, lightning-fast response.
So, finally, once the dust settles a bit, what do these signs tell us about the patient's chances? What's the prognosis?
And you know, the data here it's really sobering. For patients with a severe traumatic brain injury who start showing that decerebrate posturing, the mortality rate can be as high as 70%. That number tells you that this is one of the single gravest prognostic signs in all of neurology, and it completely changes the conversations we have to have with families.
So, let's just tie this all together. These postures, they are not just some interesting clinical finding. They are a direct, unfiltered look at the level of devastation inside the brain. They demand our immediate, most aggressive response, because every single second we save is a chance at a meaningful recovery for our patient.
And that really leaves us with a huge question for every single one of us in the clinical world, doesn't it? Knowing this direct link, knowing that a posture points to a specific anatomical injury, how can we streamline our response even further? How do we shave off those precious minutes and seconds between recognizing the sign and getting that life-saving intervention started? How do we turn this knowledge into more lives saved?